What's up guys, welcome to Knocks Out Comics, where we talk all things comics and manga. I'm Jay, and today I'm going to be getting into the very beginning of Hack Slash. I know I already did videos for Cassie and Vlad, but I wanted to give their full stories and how they met. That being said, let's get to it. The story begins with a girl named Cassandra Hack, whose father left after she was born, leaving her with her eccentric, overbearing mother Delilah, who just so happened to be a cook at a nearby high school. Over time, Cassie grew to be a bitter teenager and was considered a freak by her peers, with her mother angrily watching as Cassie was tormented. That's when some students started disappearing, and their disappearances were linked to a mystery meat that Delilah was serving in the school's cafeteria, and it didn't take long for the clues to point to her. Delilah had been killing students that hurt Cassie and was serving them as lunch to the school, but when the police confronted her, she killed herself by throwing her head into a pot of boiling gravy. Cassie was placed in a foster home and went to a new school. But news of her connection to Delilah, who was now dubbed the Lunch Lady, made her even more unpopular than she was before. Suddenly it began again as more students began to disappear. This signaled the return of the Lunch Lady, reborn as a vengeful slasher. Feeling responsible, Cassie hunted down and killed her mother, which she logged in her diary. She says that her diary should be filled with teenage girl thoughts, but she can't think of things like that and may never think of those things again. As she's disposing of her mother's returned corpse, she continues her thoughts, noting that how her mother, while somehow returned, was not the woman she once knew. She's thinking about how she just put 2 bullets in the head of the woman who used to kiss her forehead before she went to sleep, how she herself is a killer just like her mother, the weight of the gun, the way it kicked, whether Sue Ellen Myers will know that it was Cassie who saved her life. Right now, she's not thinking about how her mother is back. She just feels guilty and horrible, like she betrayed her mother after all she's done for her. She's also a little jealous because while her mother is going home, that's something Cassie will never do again. We see Cassie in bed as she continues saying where she is now is not her home. It's Shannon and Karen Moore's home. She goes on to describe Karen, saying she's nice, does everything she can to help, but Cassie hates her. She hates her because she acts like she's Cassie's mother, but Cassie wonders what life would be like if Karen had been her mom instead of Delilah, who did everything she could to protect Cassie from the evils of the world. All the evil in the world except for her. We meet Shannon, who Cassie describes as already afraid of her, not for what he thinks she really is, but because he fears the fact that she's a teenage girl. A mortal archenemy destined to disregard his rules and squeal about things he couldn't possibly fathom. It keeps him from trying to act like he's her father. She likes it this way. At school, Cassie notes the gossip she hears about how they found Sue Ellen Myers, with students and teachers alike looking at her accusingly. But in gym, she's in her element, in her armor. In the showers though, Cassie feels like she's out of her armor. Girls there who think they're perfect ridicule those who they deem less perfect, but they don't waste words on Cassie. They do, however, follow and jump her. Cassie notes that this is because within her they sense an otherness, a wrongness. They believe she is the cause of their friends' disappearances. Cassie can fight back, but chooses not to, because 1, she might kill them, and 2, she believes she deserves this. As she goes home, Cassie ponders on her numbness and confusion over the night before, and finds some comfort watching a movie with Shannon. Later that night, Cassie searches the web for any cases similar to her mother, where the dead come back to life to kill. We then cut to a party where we see a couple sneak off while a slasher looks on. The next day we see Cassie wake up and go to school. In her thoughts, she says that she feels like she's someone else, and as soon as she steps foot onto the school grounds, she hears the rumors and she can feel the stares. They're commenting about the girls from before attacking Cassie because they know that she killed their friend. But now Cassie doesn't mind. She's a blunt object, and today the bruises are her armor. This time when the girls follow her to jump her again, Cassie pummels one of the girls, warning them that if they ever touched her again, she'll kill them and they'll never find their bodies. Cassie does more research on slashers, and later as she's spending time with Shannon and Karen, Cassie thinks that with them she could have what she never had before, but that only makes what she has to do even harder. The next night, Cassie wakes Shannon holding a knife to his throat, telling him that she's leaving and not to follow her. When she leaves, we get her thoughts. She says there are killers like her mom out there. She knows what to look for, so she can find them. She can kill them as she already had once. and Shannon's fear will keep him from following her. She believes if she's going to fight slashers, she can't have family or bystanders as they'll be collateral. She goes on saying home is a place she'll never have again. She read a story about a farmer in Iowa that came back from the dead to kill anyone who stepped foot in his fields or tried to touch his daughter. That's where Cassie's headed. Next, we see Cassie practicing her karate in a few hilarious pages. Through her thoughts, we learn that Cassie took karate lessons when she was 9 years old. Her mother thought it might help her protect herself when she wasn't around, but eventually the lessons stopped and her mother put her in church, possibly because karate was expensive. But now Cassie's new faith is her mission. Cassie works at a teen dance club as a barback, partially for money but also to learn more about slashers. She learns more about the tale of Farmer Fig. Legend has it he was a strict old man with a beautiful daughter named Jenny, but he never let her leave the house. All the local boys knew about her and it became a game. They would sneak onto the farm to look at Jenny and then be chased off by the angry farmer. One day Jenny invites one of the boys into the barn while the others were on watch as the guy in the barn had his fun with Jenny. But this was all a trap Farmer Fig set up using Jenny as bait. He killed the boys and put them up as scarecrows, as a warning that his land and daughter were off limits. Soon after, the townspeople came to give their own justice to Farmer Fig, but he hung Jenny and himself. However, apparently he's now back killing anyone who trespassed on his land. We see Cassie's last part of her research, infiltrating a high school by pretending to be a student. But it's a struggle as Cassie didn't even fit in at her own school. So she just sits in her van watching the other teens. Even she notes how creepy this seems. The next night, Cassie witnesses a guy being gay bashed. She's shocked and contemplates helping. She knows that she could beat the attackers, but she's no hero. She's a hunter and this isn't her prey. Help arrives when a couple intervenes defending the guy against his attackers, but one assailant pulls out a gun, and this springs Cassie into action. She uses her bat to disarm the guy, but in doing so he pulls the trigger and shoots the tires of a nearby truck before being carried off by his friend. The girl introduces herself as Sarah to Cassie and asks for a ride home because the truck that was shot was hers. We learn that Sarah's boyfriend's name is Kelsey, and after some introductory small talk, Sarah invites Cassie to lunch at school the next day, with Cassie accepting but under her breath declining. Later that night, Cassie has a nightmare about her mother, and she ends up actually meeting Sarah at school, wearing her old school's uniform. Sarah laughs and decides that they're going shopping later. We cut back to the two idiots from earlier lost in a cornfield, as they're trying to find a party they were invited to. They find a barn, go inside and discover an old arcade game called Blood Bus. The game is on, but it doesn't appear to be plugged in. Upon further inspection, one of the boys finds pictures, but before he can actually see what they mean, the other is attacked by a crow and runs off. The other guy goes after him, but he ends up throat first into barbed wire. As he's dying and his friend is looking for him, we see the slasher getting ready to attack. We cut to the other side of the farm where we see Sarah, along with Cassie, who's sporting a makeover, arrive to the party. Kelsey and one of his friends go outside of the party where they discover the dead body of the idiot from before, hung up like a scarecrow, with a picture of his face that says 1,000 bonus points. Unfortunately though, they don't recognize that this is an actual dead body. The next night while working, Cassie is observing the teens to try to blend in, when one girl compliments on her attire, which Cassie is a little taken aback by due to her past as an outcast. Later we see Sarah and Kelsey pick her up to go to a party. Midway into the party, the police show up and everyone scrambles to leave, and we get a hilarious panel where a plus-sized goth girl knocks Kelsey over. Cassie, being the asshole she is, references the goth girl as a two-tongued gothopotamus as she and Kelsey take off. We cut to two girls who are leaving the party as well, and they're killed by the slasher. Back with Cassie and Kelsey, we learn that Kelsey knows Cassie doesn't actually go to his school. He opens up a bit and ends up telling Cassie that he and Sarah both see something in Cassie, something that they don't see with everyone else their ages. Before they know it, morning comes and they arrive at Cassie's hotel. After getting off of the phone with Sarah, Kelsey leaves, telling Cassie that she's a really cool girl. Cassie of course writes this in her diary. We cut to Kelsey where he meets a bloodied Sarah. Meanwhile, as Cassie's writing her thoughts in her diary, she wonders if maybe she's supposed to stay with Shannon and Karen, or if her chasing a legend could be a new start. Cassie discovers one of the surviving idiots from earlier. After a little questioning, he tells Cassie about the slasher and how he killed his friend at Fig's farm. Cassie takes his gun and goes to investigate. As she arrives, in her thoughts she says she got comfortable blending in instead of following her mission. She finds a half of Kelsey's photo, but the half has Sarah on it. She continues in her thoughts that her forgetting her own rules may have costed her, and then she's attacked from behind by Sarah. Hours later, Cassie wakes up tied to a scarecrow stand. Sarah apologizes, saying that she thought Cassie might understand. She wasn't sure. But after reading Cassie's diary, she knows that Cassie gets it. Cassie, confused, asks her what she's talking about, and Sarah gives her the real story. She explains that she met a guy named Matthew at 15, and they began dating and causing destruction everywhere they went. But when Sarah doesn't want to put out, Matthew teased her that maybe Farmer Fig's daughter would. Eventually they find Jenny, but she's a vegetable and had been for months after being kicked in the head by a horse. The stories were all lies. Jenny wasn't loose, she was defenseless. Farmer Fig caught Sarah and Matthew and locked them in the storage shack, where Matthew discovers the Blood Bus arcade game. He played for hours on end while Sarah thinks about how it's his fault that they're in that mess in the first place. She snaps and ends up killing Matthew. It turns out Farmer Fig was going to let them go, but the damage was already done. Farmer Fig and Sarah bury Matthew while Sarah promises not to tell. But then Matthew would show up at Sarah's house and stare at her through her window. She followed him back to the farm to learn that he killed Farmer Fig and his daughter, as well as turned the cornfield into a maze lined with nails and barbed wire. He wanted Sarah to bring him victims, and she did. But then it became too much for Sarah. She tried to bring out the human in Matthew again, but nothing worked. Sarah goes on to say that when she met Cassie, she knew that she could relate, but Kelsey didn't understand. He wanted to call the police. Just then, Sarah's interrupted by Kelsey screaming for her as he gets killed by Matthew, and Sarah pleads with Cassie to understand. Cassie says she understands, and Sarah excitedly unties her while saying that she made some progress with Matthew and asks if Cassie knows what to do next. Cassie says she does and kicks Sarah. She tells Sarah that she's going to kill Matthew once and for all. As Cassie is looking for Matthew, he sneaks up behind her and slashes her arm. Cassie ends up literally falling into one of Matthew's traps, but she baits him and they fight for a few panels. During the fight, Cassie gets even angrier when she sees Kelsey's dead body. In her thoughts, she notes that Kelsey never saw a wrongness in her. He knew who she really was and almost had her thinking she could settle there and be his friend and be normal. As Cassie is pummeling Matthew, she taunts him saying, "Let's see that handsome face." But Matthew replies, "There's no more handsome face, only grin face. He is grin face." The fight is broken up when Sarah hits Cassie with the car. And Cassie's reaction is actually pretty classic. With Cassie on the hood of the car, Sarah continues driving while taunting her and crashes them both through the barn where the Blood Bus game is. She attacks Cassie while confessing her love for Matthew and attempts to leave Cassie for him to kill. But instead of attacking Cassie, he attacks Sarah. While he's distracted, Cassie grabs her gun and shoots him in the legs and then in the head, killing him. As she's leaving, Sarah calls to her, begging that despite Cassie hating her, not to let her come back like Matthew. Cassie pours gasoline around Sarah and flicks a lighter. As Cassie leaves, she thinks to herself how she made a connection with Sarah and Kelsey. They were two potential friends. Now they're dead. Dead like her mom. As the barn burns down, we get Cassie's thoughts on her next target, the Meat Man, who has been butchering people like his namesake. She finds him and attacks. We then get the Meat Man's origin when we see a couple, Kaylin and her boyfriend, along with their baby on a train. Kaylin wonders if they lost their pursuers and comments on how quiet and sweet their baby is. But soon we see the pursuers have found them, and they are Kaylin's sisters, Shandy and Blythe. Kaylin's boyfriend tells her to run, and she does as he confronts her sisters. Kaylin tries to get help from a lady near a diner. Meanwhile, the train operator finds her boyfriend dead. We learn that Shandy and Blythe killed the old woman from the diner from Kaylin's thoughts as she continues running. But she runs into Shandy, who demands Kaylin's baby after revealing that her boyfriend is dead. Kaylin tells her that she hates her, she hates Blythe, she hates their father. She adds that they'll never have the one thing that she's ever loved, before pulling out a gun and shooting herself in the head. Shandy retreats just as we see a grumpy old butcher stumbling across Kaylin's baby in the garbage. Years later, we see that baby grown up. He recalls to the butcher how he named him Vlad because when he found him, he was a bloody monster, like Dracula. As the butcher dies, we get Vlad's thoughts. He says that for his whole life, he's lived in the butcher's shop, and the butcher took care of him. When his mother threw him away, when his body didn't work, the butcher helped him fix it and helped him grow strong. The butcher showed him how to use blades to cut meat and ease his physical pain, and now he's dead. Having never left the butcher's shop, he doesn't have anyone. He lets out his pain chopping meat with a scream that startles nearby people outside of the shop. A few days go by and Vlad has to go outside, but his lungs are weak and he can't handle the outside air. Plus he knows that people outside would fear him, so he puts on a gas mask and takes the butcher's body to a grave. At the cemetery, Vlad ends up having to take off his mask because it's full of water and dirt, and he notices how bad the air really is for him. As he buries the butcher, he notices a woman nearby. The woman is afraid of him and calls him the meat man as she begins to run off terrified. She falls into a grave and Vlad tries to help, but the woman's being a cow. Vlad notices someone watching them, wearing all white. The woman comes to her senses and allows for Vlad to help her, and we learn that the person watching them is Blythe. We later see Blythe telling her father that not only did they find the girl, who we now know is named Mary, but they've also found their nephew, Kaylin's son. Next we see Vlad meeting with Mary. She lets Vlad know that what's between them isn't a thing, she just needs a bodyguard. Through this deal, Vlad learns more about what to do and even believes that he has a friend in Mary. Mary tries to repay him for being her bodyguard, but he declines, saying that their friendship is enough. But then Shandy and Blythe attack Vlad and Mary. Blythe reveals the real reasons why they're there, and it's because of the meat man's murders. They believe that it's Vlad. Blythe offers to give Vlad info on where he came from, his real family, but when Shandy cuts Mary, Vlad snaps and chucks his machete into Shandy and hangs Blythe through a building ladder. Witnessing all this, Mary now sees Vlad as a monster and wants nothing to do with him. This breaks Vlad's heart, and he returns to the basement of the butcher's shop and only leaves to find food. He thinks about how he has no one to protect or care for, and then he's attacked by Cassie as he proclaims that he's the meat man. Eventually, Cassie finds out that he isn't the killer, and they both team up to hunt the real killer, Julian Gallo, the Mosaic man. After they kill him, Cassie apologizes for attacking him. She just believed the hype of everyone blaming the meat man. Vlad understands and says that his face can find him many truffles. He means troubles, but Cassie understands and corrects him, and he adorably replies, "Yes, also those." Cassie's about to leave, but stops to invite Vlad to travel the world alongside her to hunt slashers, and he accepts. And that was where it all started, chronologically at least. I'm going to be telling more stories from Hack Slash as soon as I can. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, hit like, subscribe, and talk to me in the comments, and I'll see you guys next time.